All right. Welcome back to Wealth on the Rhox,
Episode 2.
episode 2. I hope you checked out episode 1. We are titling this one Pioneering Progress, starting before you're ready, because that's basically what we're doing.
But before we start, before we're ready, we do want to take a look back on episode 1, and first of all, say thank you. I think, right?
Yep.
Like we got pretty decent response. At least I think so. Got almost 110 views in just a couple of days.
Yep, 3-4 days. What was it?
A couple comments.
Yep.
Some offline feedback.
Yeah.
So like no sunglasses. Thank you, Trisha.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's where we want to start is kind of taking a step back to say this is what we talked about from last episode and what we took away from it and kind of learned and the feedback that we got from different people. And of course, just again, say thank you to the support, which I think was maybe more than we really expected.
Yeah.
As far as like right off the bat, right?
Yeah. A lot of good feedback. Most of it was from family and friends because that's who our audience is right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, my mom even said that she was proud of me, like which made me feel good, and she gave kudos to you too, like, and so not just being from mom, you know, like, but like it was cool, like I could hear the excitement in her voice. I had DM from a cousin of mine who, I mean, he flat out told me, like, he was like, yo, I value my time. He was like I wanted to check this out because your family. And he said he really got into it, and I was like, that's dope. Like, so
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, cuz.
Yep, I appreciated that, and then just having the support. Like, I mean, we've been posting about it, we've been talking about it, we've been sharing it. So it's kind of the idea coming to fruition.
Yep.
And I mean, it's been warming so far. So it's really given us something to look forward to.
Overwhelmingly positive. I had a couple friends reach out, obviously close family, giving some physical critiques, right? I clear my throat a lot. I know that. Yep. Everybody's always known that about me.
I sniffle.
But I had a tendency to move away from the mic. That got called out, so I'm really trying to focus. I actually switched chairs. I don't know if you caught that. The first chair I had the rolly chair. Now I switched it to the stationary chair.
Yep, so and you could hear the roll sometimes, actually.
Man.
I mean, that's not on you.
That's the first one.
But we didn't catch it.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And then we talked a little bit about, I had Jarvis reach out and be like, hey, it seemed kind of news anchory, right? Mm-hmm. That we were talking, we got caught staring at the camera while one of us was talking. And so
even right now, I'm trying to, because right now you can't see, because I'm listening to Casey when he's talking, right? Just like this, I can see him. But I want to make sure that you all understand that too. So I'm gonna be cognizant of.
I'm not staring off, disengaging. I'm watching Brent talk in the camera that we've got in front of us too.
Right. So, and even, I mean, we have a pretty dope bromance, but I also don't know that this works. I don't know that this works if I'm sitting up here just gazing into Casey's eyes. But either way, like, the feedback was good and needed. And I'm one I'll take criticism because I mean, that's how you learn. So I'm all for it. And the overwhelmingly positive comments too, keep it all coming. And
I was trying to see my notes on it. Time. Stick to the timeline. That's part of it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your cousin said, I value my time. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of one of the facets of wealth, right? And so we want to be cognizant of that, not only to protect our time and your time, but also to make sure that we can keep you engaged.
Yep.
And so an hour and 25 minutes may not always be conducive to drawing people in to listen to what we're talking about.
That was an hour 25 after editing too. So it probably shaved off about 15 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of where it diverges. And I think that transitions pretty well into segment 2 that we wanted to talk about and kind of telling our own story in regards to that episode core header of starting before you're ready and kind of taking that leap of faith. There's really 2 conversations in that for us right now. And one is the wealth journey itself and what the whole, the I guess the subject matter of what we want to talk about on a regular basis. And then the second part for us is the podcast, right? We've jumped into something that we have, you more than me. Again, Brent's really been spearheading a lot of this stuff, and I kind of get to ride his coattails a little bit. So thank you for that. but learning how to set stuff up and what to buy and what not to buy and what to return and how it all works together. The setup is really fascinating to me, but that's one thing. And then the second part is the wealth journey itself. So when we start before we're ready, we talked about what we may be able to touch on with this, and you had some good ideas with that too. So parenting was the big one for me. The podcast, the wealth journey, I think we want to kind of to take it personal first.
Yep.
So I'll let you kick that off.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll start. So one of the things we took away too was we want to segment our show. So this segment's going to be telling your story, where we kind of let you know how we feel about this topic. So pioneering progress and starting before you're ready, which is what we all get kind of thrown into with a bulk of the things that matter to us. And even Casey and I, and even a buddy of ours, Mike, we talked about podcasting before because we wanted to focus on the dad side of things. And that made me think I have great parents, right? I mean, my dad was a great leader and he gave a big influence on me. So I parent a lot of how I saw parenting, but to be honest, they didn't actually hand me the blueprints and say, Brent, you're ready. You know, I had to kind of take what I knew. So, I mean,
that's a little bit of generational wealth, right? We talked about generational wealth not being necessarily the financial hand-me-down. It can be the stories and the traits and the priorities and things like that. And so
absolutely
parenting like your parents parented you.
And also not parenting, taking some aspects where I don't want to parent this way, especially because we're in different times. The way our parents raised us is different now. They wouldn't even parent us the same way that they parented us.
Well,
now.
They probably parent us differently now than they did when we were young too.
Yep.
Like I know but my relationship with mom and dad is very different now than it was when I was young, and that's the natural course of growing up, and that relationship's evolving. But what is it about parenting that you think that if you had to call it out, you say I started before I was ready, and you don't have a choice there, right?
Yeah, I mean that's it. You don't have a choice. You get thrown into it, and you realize that you're not ready. Right. So you have to, there's things that you have to do. You have to do this and you wing it. And then having 2 kids, like you think even having another one, it was like, well, I wasn't necessarily ready.
That's an interesting dynamic then. So when Ani was born, you had that feeling of, I'm not ready, or you tried to read a book or something like that to talk to your parents, whatever that was. And then it comes and you sort of ease into it and you make it up as you go along and you do well, right?
Yep.
I think
most
people do well as a parent. And so how is that different from Elena in the sense that, did you think you were more or less ready the second time around?
Man, I mean, that's a good question. I would probably say I was more ready with the second child because of Annalie, because she was
just by default.
Yeah, just kind of
lessons learned
by default. Yep. And I feel like we corrected things. So Ani is the difference between them, how they eat per se, right? Ani caught us in that we don't pay attention to what we eat. We eat out a lot. We eat sweets and stuff like that. So what does she eat? She eats sweets. She eats carbs, stuff like that. By the time Elena was born, it was, we got to get our act together. Like here it is again, the whole getting on the floor with my daughter and not being able to get up, being 240 pounds. I was like, we got to fix some things. So how did Elena benefit from that? She loves veggies. Yeah. She loves veggies. She's way better. She's a way better eater than any of us.
Me.
than any of us. I mean, she would sit up here and be like, no, I want cucumbers. If anybody touches those cucumbers, then they're going to have to hear from me.
And so maybe it's a good time to stop and pause that that's kind of a concentration on physical wealth, right? Like what you eat, what you put in your body, how you feel. Those are things that we talked about subconscious and conscious thought about the wealth categories. Physical wealth is, what's the focus? And I think that's one of the things that we kind of took away from last time too, is that when we were talking about the ratings, one of my takeaways and going back and listening to it was that I think I had a different perception of what the rating system was than what your perception was of it.
Okay.
And so I don't know that we fully got on the same page, and we haven't talked about that at all.
Sure.
And so starting before you're ready, right? Episode 2 of a podcast that we have this roadmap for, but it's, you know, it's like taking a one-way street through New York City. There's all these different avenues and different things that you can branch off to. And so we haven't talked about the formatting of the podcast until 20 minutes before we hit record here.
Yep.
So that rating system, I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that we can go back to down the line. But I think for me on the personal level, we kind of sticking to that parenting theme. And so I mentioned that I met Ava when she was 4. So that was a very different thing, you know, than, you know, being there for her birth. And so I think for that one, I didn't have the time to doubt or think about it. It was a very quick transition into being dad for her. And I think I credit Ava maybe more than either Trish or myself into that being a seamless transition. She made that very easy. She never was distant from me. She was my buddy right off the bat. She really was, and she still is. But
That's dope.
but I think that made it very easy. I never thought twice about it. It just felt natural with her, and so I give her a lot of credit for that. And so I never thought that I was ready or not ready in that regard, because it just was seamless.
Yeah.
From what my life was before I met Trish and Aves, they just made it. That just became the new norm for me. It wasn't like I had to stop and think and redesign who I was or anything. It was just they let me be who I was, and that was to be a good dad, and I think a good dad and a good husband right from the start. And then when Trish was pregnant with Cam, I was commuting an hour and a half one way, and maybe around 6 months, I think Trish had Braxton Hicks. She had a pretty serious case of Braxton Hicks one night, and so she calls me and she's like, I think I'm going to labor, and you know, I'm an hour and a half away, so I got to drive home, and I'm stuck on 95. And I remember that night. That was when it hit me that I am I ready to be the father of a baby, and that was a very real feel to me. And I remember vividly calling my dad and having that conversation and saying, Dad, how do you know? You know, how do you know you're ready? And what if something's wrong? And how do we handle those challenges? And Dad being dad, and you know. You talk about the generational takeaways that you bring in from parents and things you don't take away from parents, but hopefully I took this away from that. He unfalteringly just says, "You're ready.
Yeah,
you're good."
And I think you touched on a couple.
You're okay.
You touched on a couple of things too. I mean, we got resources. We got resources from the people. Right? Yep. From the people who've done it, our parents. And I remember calling my dad, telling him that I wanted this promotion, and I remember him being flat out and be like, yo, when you were little, did you feel like were you missing something? Did you not have any? And I was like, no. And here I was stressing. Yeah. And here he had the simple answers, because not feeling like I wasn't ready, always had this source to lean on, and he could always just be like, yo, don't fret. Yeah. Like you'll figure it out. Like that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, like from my dad's dadding. And like is that he was able to make everything simple.
It is. It's weird, and maybe that's true. That's that baton handoff, right? Like, so that's how it feels for us now. You look back and you've got the 2 girls that to them a problem may be the most critical thing in the world right now, and you look at it and you're like, no, that'll pass. He'll get by it. Here's a way you can handle it, or I'm going to watch you kind of fumble this one, and you'll learn from it a little bit better. But I think that's that transitional generational shift. But I think that's a good call out too, that when we talk about community wealth and in our circles and things like that, we also wanted to touch on the starting before you're ready aspect of On The Rhox itself, the podcast. And so I think to call back, one thing you mentioned last time is that you, at least at first, were kind of like, I've got this. I'm going to figure this out on my own. I'm going to bowl through it. And you mentioned to your brother, I'm really struggling with the audio portion of it. I couldn't figure out how to set up the audio. And so he jumped in and was like, I got you. Yep. So I think that's where sometimes it's not about starting before you're ready, or sometimes you have to start before you think you're ready. But to open that up and be vulnerable, we talked about vulnerability a lot last time, to say, hey, I need help. You know, I think that's maybe one of the biggest lessons, especially with this podcast. It is a lot to do a podcast.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of, I mean, even as we set up today, it was, do I remember how the setup was? I mean, we sat up here and fumbled over it. We fumbled over the mics again and fumbled over the connections and everything. But yeah, I mean, even for On The Rhox, right? We're starting this now, knowing that it's not where we want it yet, right? I mean, there's a ton of stuff that we still want. We have a vision. Like, I would love for us to have, knowing that we got to get there, right? But I see On The Rhox as a studio, more like a media company, having someone to edit, someone to manage productions. And right now that's falling on us. And so it's not what it is now, but that's not stopping us from starting.
Yeah, I think I agree. If it were a perfect scenario, right, we'd have somebody that can do the research. We talked about one of the segments that we want to do. I think the segment thing is a really good idea because it allows us to be a little choppy and say, oh, that didn't work, or let's cut that out. And hopefully it's pretty transitional, and maybe we don't cut any of it out, but we'll see on the backside of it. But I think the segment thing is a good idea. And one of the segments that we want to make sure we talk about is that first one we did the intro and we did the feedback stuff. For that one, we really want to make that kind of a what did we get from our audience, and can we bring our audience into that a little bit? What stories did they tell that we can kind of recap or bounce off of for our own experiences? Because if B and I sit here and talk about our own upbringings and our own stuff all the time, we'll get to like episode 4 before that drops off a little bit.
Or you'll just get to know us very well.
Or we're going to be really personal.
But we'll need that audience. And so far, starting with episode 2, right? We don't have that yet. Yeah. So, but we still brought it in because the segment thing wasn't even an option that we thought of for episode 1. That's the benefit from going ahead and starting. Yep. Now we're starting to get feedback. We're starting to, as we work through it, we're learning on the go through the progress, through the bumps and bruises. And I mean, and I'm an on-hand learner. I don't know about you.
Oh God, yeah.
But I mean, I can read and study this all day and have someone say, "Hey, this is how you should do your podcast. This is how you should do your YouTube." And I'm like, "Oh, those are great." And then as I go to do it, I'm gonna have to fumble through it in order to really learn it.
See one, do one, teach one mentality, right? You see someone else do it, or they show you, so you see it, and then they walk you through it, so you do it, and then you teach it back to them. We skipped the whole see one. We just went straight to do one.
Just planted everything on the table and just go.
But the other, so to kind of go back to the podcast itself, right? That was the topic for this segment, is starting before you're ready. And Brent again really drove this to the point that he took point on getting all the equipment and trying setups and guess and check and fails and stuff like that. So one of the other segments that we kind of want to talk toward is a couple different segments when it comes to making sure that we address one of the wealth specifically, or what our focuses are on for the week. Like we've got, I hit it again.
Yeah.
Trail of Breadcrumbs, where for this one, we want to talk about fear. So we kind of talked about being ready or not ready. And a lot of that has to do with fear and how we handle fear and address fear. And it's not necessarily one of the wealth aspects, but I think it can kind of lead to a lot of them. And I think for me, it speaks toward discipline wealth, right? So it's hard for me to stick to something or to start something or to get myself moving in a direction because of fear sometimes. And I don't know that I have a conscious methodology in how I address things that I fear. And I'm not talking like of the dark, or for me, spiders is my big fear, I guess. But fear of the unknown and fear of failing. You know, I have imposter syndrome worse than anybody I know. I constantly in my head about that, whether it's, at work specifically, in my relationships and in my marriage, all these things that I doubt so much about who I am and what I'm doing and whether I'm good enough, that's a hard thing for me to overcome sometimes. And so it entwines the fear against the courage to just start and just go and just do. And I think that's where you have to kind of lean toward, is that whether you think you know what you're doing or don't know what you're doing, you don't stop. You just move forward. You be intrepid in that way. But I think, I don't know what you had on that segment of it. But
when you said imposter syndrome as a writer, I mean, that's huge. I mean, I've written, my first book could have stopped me from writing forever, right? Because it just didn't have everything.
What was your first book?
It was Love's Song, and it was, please don't look it up. Like,
I asked. Love's Song by Brent Peters.
Yep. It wasn't my, I don't know where you can find it, to be honest. I'm hoping you can't.
Garage sale down the road.
Maybe. I know I got a couple copies, and there's some good things about it. Let
me read that though.
Yeah. But the good thing about that, right, is that I actually started, right? So if you ask me, I failed miserably, at my first book. I rushed it, and I walked away with that imposter syndrome. Like, yo, what am I? I'm not a writer. I just claimed to be a writer. I told people that I was a published author, and here I was. I was like, I didn't even believe in it.
Where was that within your journey? Is that what established what you would call your journey with like the rhombus link and transition to that from the time you wrote Love's Song? Was there stuff that you were working on before that you were like, this is what I want to do, this creative medium?
That was a story, again, not my genre, so it was more like a rom-com type. Okay. and that's just not me. I'm more like creative in that, and there was no creativity in it. It was really just kind of like a love story. I was like, oh, I want to write a love story and some comedy into it. But
I have to read that. Love's Song.
Yeah, and it's short. It's a really short book. I don't even know where you can find it.
Part of this conversation too is that your self-doubt is probably never the equivalent of what anybody else sees.
I mean, my wife, I know my wife liked it, and I couldn't even tell
Ray
you.
loves everything.
I couldn't even tell you if anybody else read it. No, actually, I do know a few people that have read it, and I got feedback on that too. That could have crushed me, and for a while, actually, probably did, because.
So that's exactly where I'm going with that. Is when we're talking about this lessons learned and looking back and fear along the journey and starting before you're ready. It can be crippling, right? If you do start before you're ready and you falter out the gate,
you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah, that's really hard. So props to you for having, again, the courage to come back to it. But that's kind of where I'm going with that, is that, so we talk about episode 1 versus episode 2, lessons learned and how we came back to it and what we're kind of adjusting. And then from your first book to Ascension of the Area Skimp, what did you learn from one to the next? Was it to stay true to what's important to you, like your passion and being creative and telling that kind of a narrative?
Yep. It was really being me. So I actually allowed myself to sit in my head. One of the things, again, Casey talked about fear, right? And I'm somebody who has always dealt with OCD, right? So fear is a big part of that, and really just not acting on it. So with that becoming a big goal, which I really want to save that topic for another episode, but with fear playing a big part of my life, especially inside my head, because a lot of OCD is hiding it from other people. So it's not something that really showed, but I was always fearful of something or dealing with some kind of anxiety.
And you've written about that as well, right?
Right. I blogged about it. That was another thing that I started when I wasn't ready. And I think there's a stat out there with blogging, right? So many
it's like
blogs only get so far.
Comparable to starting a restaurant.
Right.
Like 80% fails.
Yep. And the same with YouTube and podcasting. Is a lot of YouTubers and podcasters don't make it past a certain episode.
2.
Well, then we're gonna crush that then.
We already got 3 planned. But let's get through 2 first.
Right. But dang, I forgot where I was going with that.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
You transitioned from the book into blogging, and then what you were kind of taking away and learning before you got to Ascension.
Yep. So one of my goals was to turn. Dang, I feel like I'm getting more into the OCD than I want to, but I'm gonna go with it because it's a topic that I do love to talk about too. But a big goal of mine was to turn OCD from my enemy to my ally. Right. So that became a really drawing point for Ascension, where almost like fear is a large character in the story, right? Because
fear is the narrator in that story.
Yes, and which makes sense for me because fear is a narrator in my life for a long time, and still kind of is, and I also read somewhere too that which you just mentioned. I wanted to touch on before I forget that. Anxiety versus anticipation, right? That's kind of what takes us from that
this whole thing.
Fear holding us back would be that anxiety versus that anticipation, really looking forward to something and then going forward anyways. That's really become what my writing has become. And like I anticipate writing. Like I want to be in my head thinking about stuff. Right, my next project that I'm working on, I'm constantly jotting down stuff. For On The Rhox, like. This is all I want to do. Yep. Like, and it can come off
all day yesterday about this.
Yeah, we can be, Yeah, and that's
I don't know if it comes across that way.
That's a good, but for me, that's productivity. Like if I'm talking about this, the one of the 12 wealth facets, building on the rocks, working on the channel, telling the story, all of that stuff is what I want. So that anticipation moves me, whereas other stuff where might get a little anxiety driven, that can tend to hold us back. But then we have to, that's also the kind of point where we look at it and it's like, well, is that there for a reason? Because I feel like everything isn't supposed to be easy. So,
it's like primitive man, right? Fear was the driver.
Yeah.
Fear kept primitive man alive. And that was a horrible
and there's like a
call there, but you get what I'm saying, right? Sometimes you have to listen to it. It's there for a reason. It's there to stop and think and question and analyze and double check, or to veer, right? To turn away. And so to know the difference and to acknowledge it and to say, no, this is the right direction, and to overcome that, that's that humanistic experience. To say that's what makes us human. That's what makes us different from any other species or animal. But I think so we were talking yesterday in these segments and the things that we're trying to stay true to. And one of them is the missing link, right? So call back to the rhombus link. We thought that was kind of a clever play on words.
Yeah, which I give the credit to Casey. No, that's good, man. You've had so many good ideas. Like he'll send me a text or he'll call me and say this, and I'm like, and I feel like I'm trying to hold back, because there's a lot of times where I'm like, that's brilliant, Casey. And I I just want to hit him a couple times with, I don't like that. Because I feel like
you have wanted to, or you want me to
I'm trying to find something. I'm trying to find something where I can shut down. But so far,
you should see the ideas that don't make it to you. But the Rhombus Link is the parent company that Brent has founded, and that's kind of his baby. And On The Rhox is the extension out of that, to have these discussions that feed into the wealth journey. That's one of the four tenets, right?
Yep.
Of the Rhombus Link.
The 4 pillars being storytelling, financing, symmetry, and purpose.
There you go. So, but for this week's the missing link, we can do like a little, whatever that is. Some kind of introduction to it.
Yeah,
but that'll be like our weekly or bi-weekly or whatever it is, podcastly segment that we talk about one of the tenets of wealth specifically. So this is where it gets a little hesitant, because part of our journey is that we don't know, and maybe we need to offer a disclaimer that says we are not experts in any of the fields that we talk about other than our own personal lives.
Right. And even when we talk about finances, we're not financial experts.
Don't
we're
go
not
do
fiduciary.
what we talk about doing.
Because we are in this journey too.
We're learning.
Sure. We want to be, maybe considered experts, and with our researching and all, like I do feel like I do bring value to the conversation, but I'm still on that journey, and I want to be able to learn on the go as well.
Well, so and I think that's where we've all, hopefully all of us are listening to more podcasts like On The Rhox. But Brent and I kind of bounce off each other when we talk about, I was listening to this podcast, or I was reading this article, or whatever it was. And so my journey over the last week or two has been more oriented toward the financial aspect and trying to learn and stabilize and build more of a foundation on what my comprehension level is as far as our personal finances, and then how I can comprehend what's going on in the markets in the world, and specifically how it impacts the state of affairs for our country.
Do you remember your financial rating that you gave yourself?
No.
Okay.
Do you?
No, I don't, actually.
So we need to remember that, because that talks about the assessment, right?
Yeah.
We need to actually put that in writing. We talked about it would be recorded, but
I do have mine in writing. I just don't remember it.
Probably it's a lower one, because I remember my focus on that was that Trish handles a lot of our finances, and I don't pay attention to market trends and that kind of stuff. So I think it was probably a 3 or a 4.
Yeah, I'll go back, and I need to, because I did write mine down. I should have wrote yours down.
We need to track those. Yeah. But so I've tried to kind of ease into and dip my toes into the financial aspect of market trends and what corresponds with what. And one of the podcasts I was listening to, I guess the Morning Brew, the Morning Brew, and they talked about bonds, and that the yield rate for bonds had escalated, and that meant the pricing of bonds had de-escalated. And so that's an inverse relationship. But they talked about bonds and bills and notes being the bedrock that you can kind of tell what's going to happen with the economy based off of what's happening with bonds, specifically treasury bonds. And so the higher the yield rate and the lower the price of a bond generally corresponds with a higher inflation rate and an unstable economy as far as the government goes.
Okay, that makes sense then. That makes sense why it's higher than it has been in
Correct.
Umpteen years.
Yeah, so you called this out immediately, and I had to look it up. But the yield rate for a 20 or 30-year bond, and I'll try to break those down momentarily. But a 20 to 30-year bond is yielding at over 5% right now, but the price is lower than it has been in a long time. And essentially, a bond or a bill or note, treasury bill, treasury note, treasury bond, they're all kind of the same thing. They're essentially a loan from you to the government. Government's in a bad spot. They need money, so they lower the price on the bond and they offer a higher yield down once it matures. And the maturity of the bond is essentially the lifespan of the bond or the bill or the note. And so the bill is the shortest term, and it usually can be some segment of time that's less than 12 months. And then a note would be anywhere from a year to about 10 years, and then a bond would be 10 to 30 years. And that's really the primary difference. And the bond
so you won't find like a 5-year bond.
Can't do a 5-year bond. It's called a note.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
So that's where we're at so far.
Yeah.
But the yield rates are correspondent to that. So the longer you are willing to invest, say, hey, I'm going to buy a 20-year bond against the government for $10,000 or whatever it is, they're going to offer you a higher yield down the line because it's not a higher risk, but it's more money, or it's longer term investment on your side to the government. So they're going to say, hey, we'll pay you back more down the line if you're willing to put in more up front. Then the bill is the short term one. And that is the only one that doesn't offer a yield or a percentage yield. It actually, when you buy a bill, you buy it less than the face value of the bill. So if a bill is $100, they would offer it to you to purchase at $98 or $95, depending on the percentage of the yield. And then when it matures and it hits that 12-month agreement that you said, I'm going to give you this $98 up front, you can use that for whatever it is. And then after the 12 months, when it matures or it's lived its life, you're going to pay me back the full face value of the bill when I bought it from you, which is $100. So there's no percentage coupon is what they call it, but there's no percentage intake on the interest on it. There's no interest on a bill. If it's a $100 bill, they only charge you $98 to purchase that. And then at the end of the 12 months, they pay you $100 back.
Interesting.
It is.
So
I hope that's right. I think I'm confident that's correct.
Yeah, we'll look it up, and then we'll.
I've looked it up several times. I don't want to say how much time I spent on this.
Sure. But if you say $100, right? Because you're, in a sense, if you're saying pay $98 for eventually getting $100, right? So you're looking at, essentially at 2%.
Correct.
But if you go to 500, are you getting 90, or are you spending? What would that be? 490?
So it depends on what the percentage rate of the bill is. So if it's 2% and I buy a $500, I'm not that good at math. I used to be really good at math. But if it's 2% of the 500, then that's what? $10 less. So it'd be $490 you'd buy that $500 bond for, and then at the end of the 12 months you get $500 back. Okay. That's the incentive, right? So the government's saying we'll charge you less right now, but we'll pay you more than that. All bills are short, 12 months or less. It can be 6 weeks, 12 weeks. I think it's really like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months is usually what they're at. Okay. And then you shift into the notes, and the notes are interest yield, and they're generally, right now at least, they're high yield. So 3 to 5%, I think, are where the notes are. And again, same concept, but you're buying the bond, or they're buying the note at full price, full market price. Okay. And the government, and the reason that people prefer bonds and T-bills and T-notes is that they're generally very secure.
Sure.
Right? They're backed by Uncle Sam. The government says, yep, this is a security that we are offering, that we will pay you back in full. And as long as essentially the economy exists stably, then with any level of stability anyways, they will pay you back in full with the interest that they've offered.
Yeah. So I think the short conversation that we had about this, because I in my investment journey, like, I'm familiar with stocks, right? And listening to financial analysts, a lot of them now are questioning, right? With the stock market being as volatile as it is, we're just coming off of some very low months, or some harsh months in the market. And so now the analysts are like, well, does October take us, back to more earnings, or are we going to see more losses again? So with this increase for T-bills, T-notes, T-bonds, which has not been a part of my research yet. I have heard them starting to question more, do I go into, bonds? Because at least you're getting 5%.
Yeah, it's a more stable version of the security. And the security
whereas normally someone would go into stocks and investing because they can get higher, right? A higher percentage, right? You might go into the market expecting, at least 10%, up to 15%, and there even being a bigger possibility. Whereas the 5%
higher
is
risk,
safer,
higher reward.
right?
It's a safe investment essentially. It's kind of like a high yield savings account, but a higher yield.
Okay,
very literally. But so then when you shift into the bonds are the same thing as the note, except it's generally 20 to 30 year offerings. And right now, at least, it's over a 5% yield. So if you bought $100,000 and you get $105,000 back at the end of the maturity. And the other part of it, they are very liquid because of the demand against them, right? So everybody wants a bond or a bill or a note because it's essentially guaranteed money as long as the United States economy doesn't collapse.
Sure.
It's more or less what it is. So you can sell them off at any time.
But even if it does, it's probably one of those things. If it's a 10-year bond, then is that something
not my understanding is that it depends on your definition of collapse, right? If the economy literally collapses, you're sitting there with a piece of paper that just says 10 million.
But if in 10 years our economy is back and running again and strong,
I don't know. So that's a good question. So if it dips.
Yeah,
is that what you're saying? So if the economy is
down, so it's more like
a
down curve, but it comes back by the time.
My guess, and again, good question.
Yeah,
haven't done the research. But
sure.
My guess would be that if the market is significantly down at the time of a large number of bonds mature, and they sell them at different times, right? They offer them at different times, and they mature at different times, and I think that balances itself out. But my guess is that if a large number of bills or notes or bonds mature at the same time, when the economy is down, what they'll do is create more and sell them at the time to bring that liquidity in so they can pay out the ones that have tried to cash out.
That makes sense.
So that's a very amateur rendition of my understanding of bills, notes, and bonds.
Man, but bravo.
But
I mean, this being the section where we're saying, the missing link, right?
That's
we want to learn something new because that's part of this journey.
I don't know how I got not week one, but session one. But I think that's the correlation and why it matters, right? I think that was the important part that we wanted to kind of touch on. Why would we do this? Why take the time to try to learn about these things that I'll probably never really delve into? But it has a very real impact, right? So if you consider that bonds and treasury bonds themselves are sort of that bedrock as far as what the economy is based on, you'll notice that the higher the inflation starts to go, the lower the price on those bonds starts to drop. And so that's the government saying, I need to stabilize the inflation rate, which is the cost to consumers. I need to make sure that I get some money back so I can balance that out a little bit and stabilize our economy. So I'm going to offer it a lower price and a higher yield. That's why those are inversely related. Okay. And generally the price of the bond itself is inversely related to inflation as well.
Makes sense. One question. When you say,
okay,
Google it. And if we can't answer, but when you say price,
it's a literal price. So so there's different ways that you can buy a bond, right? I'm doing my best here. I feel like I'm floundering.
No. I brilliant.
Fine. It's imposter syndrome. It's also, I think it's right. I feel very confident that what I've said is correct. But so you're asking, how do you buy it or?
No, like if you say,
literally,
because I would have looked at any of them as whatever I can invest is the price.
I think they come in, I don't know. So I don't know the answer to that question. Like what is the price of a bond? Is kind of what you're asking, right?
Right.
I have no idea.
Okay.
$1,000. I think it's like increments of 100 or something like that, or increments. Of
so then you're buying multiple. So someone who just has tons of money, right? If they just drop 10,000, then
and there's different ways too, right? Like a corporation can go buy an S ton of bonds or notes, and then they can resell them down from there. So they may corner that and then resell them. And as long as you don't pay more than what the yield is going to be, then you're still going to make out on top. It's just that if it's a 5% yield on a bond and a corporation buys a bunch of bonds and then resells them, they may sell it at 3%. So I'll get 3%, but they keep that 2% difference.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
So resale and economics.
I thought that was
no idea.
I thought that was good.
All right. So that's the why, right? It impacts mortgages, it impacts inflation, it impacts costs of goods. Not impacts, but it is an indicator of those things. So those bonds, those bedrock, the government notes, essentially, that is the government saying I either need help or I'm good. I'm not going to release any more bonds for a little while. So
good stuff.
there you go.
And very on topic. I mean, and that was the one thing we talked about when we came in here. I was like, what are we adding to the missing link? In case he was like, T-bills, T-notes, T-bonds. And I was like, oh.
Again, I don't want to say how much time I've spent on that because I had to reread a couple of things and a couple of times. And I think that's hopefully, it's not for us
well,
to come to the table.
I can guarantee you it wasn't enough, right? Because you
correct,
right. So
this is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of
ongoing.
what would make it useful to most people. It's just good to know. And that's kind of my driver is that I may do something with it, I may not. We may look to invest in a bond or something like that. But to know how it impacts my day-to-day is really my driver here. My motivator is whether it's financial or physical or Soulicle, whatever the wealth is that we're going to focus on each week. That's the second question. One is to learn about it. And the second is how does it impact me and why would I care? So that's what we want to convey to you guys is why care, right? Why care about a bond or a bill or a note? And it's because that's something that if you hear bond yield rates are up and prices are down, that usually means that it's an indication that inflation is going to go up a little bit more.
And
I guess that's the simplest way to put that.
Read any kind of financial book, and they're going to say the biggest way that you can increase your finances and get better at finances is increasing your financial literacy.
Yeah. So that's what I wrote in the journal for this week is financial wealth / knowledge equals financial freedom.
Yep.
So, all right. So that's, I think I felt like that was lengthy and wordy in my opinion. So we're going to shift away from that segment now.
Sure. And now we're going to go to mapping out our journey. Okay. Which is really because we, again, the big thing for On The Rhox is us talking about the comprehensive wealth journey.
With you.
Yes.
Right? That's an important thing that I think we constantly want to just make sure that you're aware. This is not designed to be Brent and I just talking at you each episode. It's comment. Tell us what you want to know about. What would you recommend we do for the next missing link? That'd be a good one.
That would be. Yep. That's perfect. But
but then I think you talked about the assessment. So you asked me a minute ago, what did I rate myself financially? I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
But that's where we would genuinely invite you guys to kind of come along the journey with us. And I think that's what you were talking about with kind of that assessment for the audience too.
Yes. And so for instance, again, I was saying I should have wrote down Casey's too, but I wrote down mine, right? So again, just a breakdown. And again, you can check out episode 1 for a better description, a better breakdown of each wealth category. But for On The Rhox, we're talking about the 12 facets of wealth, which include financial wealth, social wealth, physical wealth, freedom wealth, spiritual wealth, Soulicle wealth, creative wealth, influential wealth, community wealth, generational wealth, wealth of discipline, and energy wealth. So in the first episode, we basically gave ourselves a scale 1 out of 10 for each category. Where do we rank ourselves?
And to your point, we kind of go into what the detail of our interpretation of each of those is and what we want to focus on coming out of each of those. So
yes.
Definitely go back and watch episode 1. I know it's long. Maybe we can give like the time that gets it's a little bit later into it. I think we start to break it down, maybe about halfway.
Probably about 30 minutes in. I think so our introduction is about 30 minutes and then we go into about an hour talking about the wealth categories,
but worth it. It's good conversation.
Absolutely. Yep. So when we get into this segment, mapping the journey, we want to make this the focus because this is how I'm mapping out my journey. This is how Casey is mapping out his journey. And this is how we want to share it with the world too, to say, we can put a bigger focus on our wealth by breaking it down and kind of taking, where we think we are now, kind of giving yourself a base and then moving forward there to say, hey, I want to focus on Soulicle wealth or creative wealth or social wealth or financial wealth, right? So, and in order to do so, I mean, sometimes we got to step back and understand where we are. So for this segment, mapping out the journey, right? We want to be able to say, what do we want to say? Maybe for a week for we had talked about right now we're entering the 4th quarter of 2023.
Yep.
So we've rated ourselves. We want you to rate yourself as well. And we're going to have I'm going to go ahead and show it. We're going to have a free assessment where you can check out and go through. So now I have it up on the screen. This is the comprehensive wealth journey assessment, right? This is where you can rate and track your wealth progression.
And this breaks it down, right?
Right. This breaks it down. So this will go through. I don't know how well it's shown on the screen, but
it looks cool from here.
Yeah. But you're going to basically dissect yourself, take a look inside and say, yo, where do I stand here? And how do I want to get better? So when we go to, and you can break it down individually, right? And then I would think the goal is for us to rate ourselves each quarter. And we want to get to a point where you can take this assessment and look at it in the quarters to come and say, you know what? I have progressed in financial wealth. I have progressed in social wealth and in any category. And at the same time say, you know what? In this journey, I see that I've fallen off here or there or wherever it may be. Right. So as I get out of here, so we'll have a link up. I gotta work on it and put it together because I want to make that a free option for everybody to be able to just grab that and say, hey, where am I? Let me rate myself, and way you can kind of.
And I like the formality of like that quarterly rating, right? You kind of compared that to like work or a business or something like that, or a big corporation. They do these quarterly releases. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we're talking about. We're managing ourselves and our focuses and our goals, and so once a quarter, we want to kind of step back and say, well, what was my focus, or where did I step back? Where in other areas I stepped forward. And I think we collectively, Brent and I, want to be like that weekly meeting or that bi-weekly meeting to say, hey, this is what we're kind of looking at. This is what we're focused on. Reminder for you to kind of keep track of what you're doing and what you're focused on for the week or the 2 weeks between each episode that we're releasing. And I think for us, for me at least, I could sense a difference in what I was doing and what I was paying attention to since the last episode. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me is that I sent you that screenshot of the Yahoo Finance. I was like, this makes no sense. I was like, I don't understand what this is saying. And you helped me kind of converse that. And that's perfect, right?
Yep.
That would be the invite too, is that we want these Discord conversations. We've got one with the other guys, is that we would have this big group to say, hey, what are you guys seeing in this trend? Or what does this mean to you? Or struggling with my workouts this week, just that support group or that audience integration and interaction. And so I think that's kind of what my takeaway was from the last one to this one, is that it became tangible almost, the focus that I was putting into different aspects of life. And, you know, when I'm taking that minute where I'm tired walking in the door, we talked about that a little bit last time, because of these conversations and this active thought about what we're doing here, it gave me that extra pause to say, okay, leave it at the door. Don't walk across that line and bring anything from work home or from home to work, right? Be intentional with what you're doing, be disciplined with what you're talking about. And I think that might be a good kind of transition to the outros. We talked about discipline a little bit last time, and one of the conversations that was very polarizing was the snooze button.
Yeah.
And so I think we meant to bring this up in the intro, but I think it's a good kind of segue out. But we want to do these callbacks, right? We talked about the snooze button. You talked about hitting the snooze button multiple times is something you just didn't understand.
I called my wife out and she ain't like it.
Oh God, we got more feedback on that than anything else, and I think that was it was cool though. Like
I called my best friend out, and he ain't like it.
You called me out, man. I use the snooze button. I don't use it for an hour, Ray. But I definitely use the snooze button, and we talked about the different tools that you use to kind of overcome those actual real life scenarios. And so that's kind of what we want this to be, right? This weekly reminder or bi-weekly reminder of, hey, we're focusing on this. What are you focusing on? How are you playing that into your day to day? And then tell us about it, right? Talk to us.
Yeah.
Leave a comment, send us a message, give us a call.
You know, and you said something too. You brought up the conversation how we talked about doing quarterly reassessments.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, can you imagine managing your goals like a business?
Yeah.
Like,
no, I can't.
Like,
I've said, yeah, but no.
Well, I mean,
I've never had that focus on self.
Sure.
And that's what you're saying, right?
Well, yeah. But now doing it, putting your goals and running it like a business. Like, I mean, to me, that sounds fire to me. Like,
yeah.
So it sounds like
imagine doing that for a quarter over quarter and then year over year and really having that
and
level
tracking
of
your
focus
progression
on what you're doing to better yourself.
Yep.
And that is on the rocks, right? That's the whole point of what we're doing, is to have our own conversations about what we're focused on, to bring you into that conversation so that we can support you, or you support us in a lot of ways too, right? Like, there are experts out there that are going to call me out on my bills and notes and bonds.
But they got to understand this is part of our journey. Like, I mean, we're doing this for a reason, because the best way to show that you know something is to teach it. Yeah. Right. So
that was hard. That was hard, man.
Right. Like, how do you know that you know it if you can't tell someone else how to do it? Right. And so, and even if, let's just say, even if it wasn't all correct, it doesn't matter. Right. Because now you got the opportunity, and now it's going to trigger something for me, because that's kind of where I am. I wanted to know more about the T-bills and T-notes and T-bonds. It just hasn't been there yet. But now that we've had this discussion, it feels like that's going to move up the priority list.
I agree. And I think that's the takeaway for me, is that it may not be 100% correct, or it may be a fraction of a percent of the bigger picture of how and what those impact. But I've got that under my belt. I've got some knowledge that I can now, at the very least, understand the water cooler conversation about it. But I also am starting to understand how it impacts decisions, like literal decisions in our day-to-day lives, and our longer-term decisions about housing and cars and loans and things like that. And so to be able to see trends ahead of time is a power that I don't currently have, but I'm shifting that direction. And to be able to see, it's almost like seeing the future, right? If you know how one thing impacts the next and the next and the next, that's what the trend is. So if this impacts the next thing with inflation impacts cost of goods,
and the wealthy know
groceries
this.
And stuff. Yeah,
the wealthy know this, right? Just what you said, right? Trying to looking at trends and stuff like that. The wealthy know this, and it comes easier to them. Yeah, right. Whereas we're still learning.
I thought you said the wealthy notice.
Oh no, the wealthy know this.
I got you. Yeah.
Yes.
Agreed. 100%.
Yep.
They know all they've done is educate themselves in a way that most of us haven't.
Yep. They understand how this affects this, and how this affects this, and this happening means this is going to trend like this. Yep. So, all right, it's important. So yeah, we'll get to
assessment, comments, inclusion. Reach out to us. Again, huge thank you to everybody, and to you. I mentioned courage and that I was proud of you. It's kind of cool,
bro.
It was a lot of fun.
And thank you to you too, because I don't know that I would have approached this like this without you, right? Because that was my big takeaway from before, is I was doing everything by myself, and it makes it hard.
Bromance.
Yeah, that's my dude. All right, but yeah, we'll wrap this up. Yep. But yes, so again, the episode being a lot about starting before you're ready, and I mean, if that's you feel like that's you, again, comment, DM us, let us know, find our socials, and just let us know. I mean, we would love to bring it up on the next episodes and be able to have bigger discussions. So
agreed. Yep. All right. On that note, we'll see you next episode.
Yeah. See you next time.
Episode 3 coming at you.
Yep.
All right. Toodles.
Love it.